Hey Tribe, it's Tyson Johnson, another Six Pack Dad Tribe podcast episode. And we have a real treat to Todd Plum, who's a medical doctor. Just almost providence that he actually joined the tribe and has been one of our more successful customers over the last month and a half, just remarkable success. And he's one of those guys who's constantly giving back. And so I asked him to come on basically the show, and he's constantly been sharing different principles of science that really align with what we teach in the tribe. But it's even more exciting because he's a medical doctor and has the background. And so we've got a presentation to go through tonight, just some principles. But before I hand it off to Todd to introduce himself and get started, obviously, it goes without saying that any of our listeners, before they begin any type of a nutrition or exercise program, should meet with their doctor. We're not giving medical advice here. We're just sharing scientific principles that have peer-reviewed science behind them. And frankly, that a lot of our listeners are missing many of these pieces. So with that, Todd, thanks for carving out some time tonight. So happy you're with us. And if we could, maybe you could briefly introduce yourself before you get started here.
Great, Tyson. It's great to be with you. Can you see me on the screen, or is it just my presentation?
I can see the presentation and your face at the bottom here.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, my name is Todd Plum. I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian. I'm an anesthesiologist. My background is in anesthesiology. I was a family practice doctor for 9 years in a small town. I did the whole spectrum of family medicine and small town practice, including everything in the emergency room and surgery, including outpatient clinic and long-term care and other things that I did for a long period of time. So I did in family medicine for 9 years, and I've been doing anesthesiology now for about 23 years, going on 23 years, I believe. People think I'm getting close to the end of my practice, but like I said, I am not a nutritionist or a fitness coach or a dietitian. I have taken a lifelong interest in health and fitness, and even though I've been extremely interested, and it has been a daily goal of mine to be fit, I've not really succeeded in the long term. And over the years, I accumulated a lot of weight and got very heavy, and I noticed a decline in my health. And even though I tried multiple times in a variety of ways to get healthy and fit, I just was unsuccessful, and it became very difficult, and I became very despondent and hopeless about it, and was really looking for something to kind of get me going back on track again. And I saw your ad on YouTube, the Six Pack Dad Tribe, and I thought, that sounds great. I'm going to look into this. Most of the time I click out of those ads, but I looked and I'm very happy that I did, because it's showing me some success, and I think I can continue to be successful going forward, because I feel good about things. I really do. And the fact that your program is supported by some scientific principles that I kind of want to go over tonight. Now, I feel a little bit hypocritical, having not been a long-term successful, fit, healthy person. I'm on my own journey, and I'm learning as I go still in life. So with that, I will present a little bit of scientific background information that is supportive evidence for the program that Tyson has made, which is I think is incredible. So without saying anything further, I'm just going to go ahead and go through my little presentation. Thanks, Tyson. So I want to talk about long-term fitness success and why Six Pack Dad Tribe formula is I think most likely to help us be successful. Let's see if I can advance that slide. Okay, so obesity is a chronic, relapsing, stigmatized, socio-psychological metabolic disorder. It's a complicated disease. The current medical establishment is not good at treating this illness. And despite that, it's like the number one contributor to, to health problems and just misery in our society, we're not really good at treating it. It's not working for us. Close to 2 billion people worldwide are overweight, and the numbers are rising. The CDC's National Center for Health Statistics numbers, which I got off their website, shows that 42.4% of US adults were obese in 2018. Over 60% of people are overweight in the United States. That's just alarming numbers. Let's see. Gotta get this cursor down here. So since the 1960s, the average weight has increased dramatically. And now you can see this somewhat complicated graph here. The green lines, the solid green line represents males, and the dotted green line are females. And you can see the percentage of the population who are obese just climbing dramatically from 1960. That curve is quite steep. And it was kind of increasing a little bit before then, but all of a sudden around the 70s, it got extremely steep. This is from the National Center for Health Statistics report and the CDC. So what changed? More than one thing changed, I believe. And a lot of people, there are a lot of reasons for our changes. There's, of course, dietary factors, activity levels, healthcare settings, all of these things are causes. We have cars and different transportation, which make our life easier. We have tools that make things easier, availability of all kinds of conveniences, automation, refrigeration, refinement of foods, processing of foods, increased palatability, additives to foods, advertising, targeting people to increase their food intake and the intake of the wrong type of foods. I was watching the NFL game, and football game this last weekend, and it almost made me want to get up and have some food that I shouldn't have. So chemical additives, pesticides, medications, which also cause obesity, flavor enhancements. And then our entertainment has become a lot more sedentary, and our sociality has changed. We're not as active socially. And of course, all these are just a small number of the things that have changed that have contributed to this worldwide societal, malady of obesity. So lots of things have changed. So what I want to address are maybe some ways that we can fix some of these problems and hopefully have some long-term success. So these are some statistics about the long-term success for weight loss, and the numbers are really dismal. Here's a study from the American Journal of Public Health showing that the annual probability of an obese person attaining normal body weight after 9 years follow-up was 1 in 210 for men and 1 in 124 for women. So these people who were trying to attain weight loss and attained a degree of weight loss, they follow these people for 9 years, and at 9 years, only 1 out of 210 men were able to maintain their weight loss. I mean, that's just dismal. We really haven't got a handle on these things. So I want to talk about some strategies that the Six Pack Dad Tribe has, which can counteract these dismal results and probably likely improve our long-term success for weight loss and fitness maintenance. And the 4 things I want to kind of focus on are meal timing, macronutrition, sustained physical activity, and what I like to call supportive accountability. And these are all tenets of Tyson's program, which I think are really contributors to the success of the program. So just going to address each one briefly and go over a few things. So meal timing, when we eat, how often we eat, when we don't eat. I want to talk about that first. So here's a study. This is an original investigation from just this year, 2022. It's entitled The Effectiveness of Early Time Restricted Eating, Weight Loss, Fat Loss, and Cardiometabolic Health in Adults with Obesity. And it was in JAMA Internal Medicine, so reputable journal source. And just a little review of the study. There were 90 participants between the ages of 25 and 75 years old. Their mean body mass index was around 40. The time restricted there was two groups, two cohorts. There was a time-restricted group who had a low-cal diet, and then there was another group that just had the low-cal diet. So, and there was an 8-hour time restriction in the time-restricted group. So basically, both these groups had ingested the same amount of food. One group did it within an 8-hour window, and the other group ate whenever they wanted to, but throughout the day, the same number of total calories ingested. The time-restricted eating cohort had more weight loss. They had an improvement in their diastolic blood pressure, improvement in their mood and vigor, and that weight loss improvement was equivalent to an additional 214 calories a day. So it was like they were eating 214 calories less per day over that period of time for the study in the time-restricted group. So it was more successful than just the low-calorie diet by itself. And other metabolic markers were improved. Blood pressure was improved. Their mood was improved. Their sense of vigor was improved. So all of these are interesting, side effects of fasting or time-restricted eating. Here's another study from the Journal of Translational Medicine showing, talking about the effects of 8 weeks of time-restricted feeding on the basal metabolism, maximal strength, body composition, inflammation, and cardiovascular factors in resistance trained athletes. So basically, these are weightlifters. And their conclusions showed that an intermittent fasting program in which all calories were consumed within an 8-hour window, in conjunction with resistance training, could improve some health-related biomarkers, including they had a decreased fat mass and maintained muscle mass despite having the time restriction. So this is in comparison to people who had an ad lib eating window. These people who had an 8-hour window had more maintenance of muscle mass and a decreased fat mass. So their overall body composition was better than the group that had ad lib eating throughout the day. Something was preserving their muscle mass and decreasing their overall fat mass. Here's another study that's interesting. This one's an interesting study because it talks about how time-restricted eating might improve our leptin sensitivity. Just to review about leptin, leptin is a hormone that is made in our fat cells. It's a little protein molecule that goes up to the brain in the hypothalamus, and it signals that you're full, that you should stop eating. And it's produced and it's directly proportional to the amount of fat that we have. So this study shows that although obesity is associated with leptin resistance, people who have this metabolic syndrome in our society, they're obese, hypertensive, pre-diabetic or diabetic, all these factors, although obesity is associated with a leptin resistance, that means that hunger hormone that says stop eating doesn't work anymore. They said in this study, we hypothesized that under fasting conditions, leptin sensitivity might be restored. So that leptin resistance that makes us feel like, oh man, I just want that insatiable hunger that you can't get enough. You want to keep eating when you should be through. That can be fixed by following a fasting program rather than a low-calorie diet program to some degree. It looks like in this study. Moreover, leptin sensitivity is dynamic in obese subjects and depends on the feeding status. So there was some thinking that once you got to a certain level of obesity, you were so insensitive that leptin had no more effect, but there's still some effect it is still dynamic when you have the fasting window. During fasting, leptin signaling appears to be affected even in hyperleptinemic obesity. People who have really high leptin levels, they're leptin resistant, fasting still seems to be effective in improving the sensitivity of that leptin signal. So that fasting might make it so that we don't have that insatiable hunger to always consume carbs, to keep eating when we should be full, all those things. So I think that's great. Here's another slide I just wanted to discuss about the reasons why intermittent fasting works better than low-calorie dieting. And I just want to focus on a few reasons. There are a multitude of reasons. And the body is so complicated that these are just a small window into what happens metabolically when we eat. So there's a whole hormone in our body called lipoprotein lipase. This is a little protein that sits on the lining of our blood vessels. So, and it catches free fatty acids as they're floating by. And it triggers them to deposited into our fat cells. So this is an anabolic fat storage hormone. This lipoprotein lipase is stimulated by insulin. So when insulin is present, lipoprotein lipase activates fat storage. The next hormone, hormone-sensitive lipase, some people confuse these two. Hormone-sensitive lipase is actually a protein that's in your fat cells. And when insulin is present, hormone-sensitive lipase is inactivated. What hormone-sensitive lipase does is it gets the fat out of the cells. So it breaks down or mobilizes the fat from your cells so that it can be used as fuel. When insulin is present, hormone-sensitive lipase is inhibited and you can't access your fat storage. So that's how insulin works, is it inhibits the hormone, the protein enzyme, I should say, not hormone, inhibits the protein enzyme that mobilizes fat from your fat cells source. So when you have high insulin levels, let's say you're eating all day long, a low-calorie meal, but you're eating carbohydrates frequently throughout the day, your insulin levels are chronically sustained. What happens is hormone-sensitive lipase is inhibited. You can't access your fat for fuel, so you don't burn fat for fuel. What you do is you lower your metabolic rate. Your body becomes tired, you become fatigued, you have less vigor, and you can't access your fat stores. So, you need that fat is there for a reason, so that we can have fuel in times when we're not eating. So that's a good reason why fasting with these low insulin levels allows us to use our storage fat for fuel. That's why these people have more vigor when they're fasting. It's because there's a fuel source available. It's not inhibited by the presence of insulin when we're fasting. So we have a fuel source and we have more energy and we burn fat. So there's another, this is a mouthful, inflammatory pleomorphic adipokines. These are inflammatory molecules that are secreted by adipocytes, fat cells, and they cause all kinds of mayhem in our body. A lot of the inflammation that we have in our body that people talk about are these inflammatory molecules that are secreted by our fat cells. And as insulin levels go up, these inflammatory adipokines increase and cause this inflammatory response. And some people have hypothesized in some of the studies that these adipokines are the reason why we have insulin. They cause the insulin insensitivity. They also might cause the leptin insensitivity and a multitude of other adverse effects in the body. So insulin, is directly related to this increase in these inflammatory molecules. And then there's another hormone. When you're fasting, I shouldn't say hormone, I keep saying hormone, but what I mean is another protein molecule called adiponectin, which is beneficiary. It helps with our metabolism. It helps decrease inflammation. And that is also secreted by fat cells in the fasted state. So that's a beneficial one that might help improve our weight loss. It activates these catabolic, fat catabolic enzymes. And then finally, protein sparing. So what happens when let's say that you're eating carbohydrates all day long, and you're eating, even though you're eating a low-calorie diet, insulin is present. You can't access any fat because of hormone-sensitive lipase is inhibited. And so even though you have glucose present in your body, you actually need protein for other, things in your body, other metabolic needs, all the enzymes, all the muscle production, all those things. And sometimes the body will break down its own protein stores in order for us to continue to survive. When you're fasting, ketone bodies, which are part of the fatty acid molecule, they have a protein sparing effect. Your body can use these ketones instead of carbohydrates or glucose. Both the brain and the heart are obligatory glucose utilizers. So except for they can use ketones. So this protein sparing effect, when we're fasting, when we're not eating, when our insulin levels are low, it helps us from breaking down our own body's protein. It has a muscle sparing effect. You notice that in the bodybuilders, how they had improved fat loss and better protein sparing, retained their muscle mass in the fasting group compared to the group that was eating without fasting. So that was kind of a complicated, long description, but I'm not sure I did it justice. But anyway, the next thing I'd like to talk to you about besides meal timing is just nutrition. And I want to focus on the macronutrient ratios in the six-pack dad tribe and how we're focusing on the macronutrient ratios that's going to be successful. This is just a really crude graph showing the effects of nutrients on blood glucose and in secondary to that effects on insulin. The insulin graph follows exactly like the glucose graph here. So as you increase your intake of sugars, I say glucose, but it could be any of the sugars, sucrose, fructose, glucose, galactose, lactose, all of those sugars will increase this affect insulin secretion, and insulin goes up quite dramatically. Proteins in the yellow has a less dramatic effect. There are some protein amino acids, that do cause an increased insulin, but it doesn't seem to be as detrimental. Leucine, isoleucine, valine, these potentially arginine can increase our insulin levels a little bit more than other amino acids. Fat has a very minimal effect on insulin secretion. So we know that insulin is the bad actor. Dr. I'm trying to think of his name. Is it Bickman? Dr. Bickman from BYU. His presentation that's on Tyson's website talks about how insulin is responsible for the metabolic problems we have. And chronically elevated insulin leads to cellular insulin insensitivity. And then cellular insulin insensitivity leads to higher insulin levels. So it becomes a vicious cycle and just propagates to the point where we become completely insulin insensitive. We develop type 2 diabetes and a host of other problems. And as you can see, all the effects of insulin on our body, as insulin goes up, obesity goes up, diabetes occurs, all these things. So we talked about leptin sensitivity being improved by fasting. Here's a study from American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showing a high protein diet induces sustained reductions in appetite. Its conclusions show that a dietary protein increase also improved leptin sensitivity and resulted in significant weight loss. This anorexic effect of protein may contribute to the weight loss produced by low carbohydrate diets. So it actually may not necessarily be the low carb component. It may be the high protein component that has this anorexic effect. So because of improved leptin sensitivity. I thought that was another interesting or supportive article of increasing our protein macronutrients. There's another article about the nutrition side showing a high protein diet improves long-term fat loss maintenance. This is what we're after. We're after long-term fat loss. And this is showing that a fat-reduced diet high in protein seems to enhance weight loss and provide a better long-term maintenance of reduced intra-abdominal fat stores. Protein versus carbohydrates in these people seem to have better at long-term weight loss, people who maintained it. Another study. This one here is from a behavioral magazine. So our medical literature. High protein diets are more successful for weight loss maintenance. And what they did was they looked at all of the, they said, let me just read the conclusions. Body weight, I can't read past my screen there. Body weight loss and weight maintenance depends on the high protein, but not on the low carb component of the diet, while it is unrelated to the concomitant fat content of the diet. So it's really interesting in this study. Everybody's been focused on the low carb aspect, which causes the ketosis, which increases our ketone and the suppressant effects of ketones, and of course the keto diet. But it also might be more of the protein effect, according to some of these studies.
Dr. Plum,
Yeah.
do you mind if I ask you just a quick question here?
Yeah.
give your voice just a rest for a second too. This has been fantastic. Obviously, we're not really outlining exactly what our program is. We're just talking general principles, which is exactly what we want. From your experience, just being a member now for going on 2 months, have you found that when we say a high protein diet, do you feel like our recommendations are still reasonable? Because I'm thinking a lot of our listeners might be thinking in the back of their minds, like, what are we talking here? Am I going to become a bodybuilder? And am I going to have to eat chicken 8 times a day? Like, again, we're not prescribing specifics for the purpose of this podcast, but just do you feel like it's reasonable to still reap the benefits of this from your experience so far?
Yeah, I do think it's very reasonable. The reason I believe it's reasonable is because before people join the Six Pack Dad Tribe, I think that what happens is they probably ingest a abundance of calories. I know that myself, there were days I had over 5,000 calories, and this is not a unique event. You know, I could put away the calories pretty easily. You know, you can go to a restaurant and down 3,000 calories if you have everything you want. Easy, no, it's not a problem. And the protein intake in those high calorie diets is probably equal about to the amount of protein you're suggesting, but it doesn't have this satiating effect because of all the refined sugars and other things that are in the diet and those things. So I don't think there's lots of studies looking at the optimal amount of protein. I've been perusing some of those recently, and I'll kind of review a few of those here in just a minute. But their recommendations are there's a minimum daily requirement of protein, and it's something like 0.35 grams of protein per pound of body weight. But they're saying that's a minimum. That's not a optimum recommendation. That's a minimum recommendation to prevent protein malnutrition. And if you're active, you're exercising, you're active in your life, you're trying to get a fit body, that's well below the necessary requirements. And you'll see some studies here in a minute. It'll show a few things like that. Let me see here. So before I go back to talk about that, how much protein, let me just talk a little bit about how the high protein diet induces this thermic effect. And Tyson's talked about this before. And protein diets have an effect in that protein is harder for your body, not harder, but it requires more energy to digest proteins than it does other macronutrients. And standard theory is that protein takes about 30% of its calories to actually digest itself. So you use inactive chewing your food, swallowing your food, broken it down with amylase and other enzymes in your stomach and intestine, and that being transferred by enzymes across the intestinal wall, and then that affecting your mitochondria, breaking down the proteins into their amino acids, and then the effect of excreting the proteins and all those things. It causes you to use more calories in the processing of these proteins versus other macronutrients. So carbohydrates in their complex form, like let's say you're eating broccoli or something, a complex carbohydrate, a plant-based food, that may have a thermic effect of around 10 to even 15%. Refined carbohydrates are much lower than that, flours and sugars and those things. And then fats are 2 to 3%, it looks like. So they're very, very efficient at producing calories. So it takes, protein has this effect of increased thermogenesis. So it uncouples the ATP production from the Krebs cycle a little bit. And what you do is you produce more heat when you eat protein. They call this the thermogenic effect. More heat. It's a little bit less efficient when you eat protein. You can eat the same amount of food, but it takes more calories to digest. So it gives you like a little kickback, a discount, like a tax deduction sort of thing. So that's a really interesting thing that helps high protein diet be more effective. And the thermic effect we know is may be mediated by the sympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight response. The sympathetic nervous system causes you, to be more energetic, to move more, to expend more energy. And it looks like it's mediated by this sympathetic nervous system, this thermic effect. It's interesting because some people are given, for example, beta adrenergic blockers for treatment of things like high blood pressure. And we know that beta blockers cause weight gain. And I think one of the mechanisms for weight gain from beta blockers is that it blocks the thermic effect of foods by the sympathetic mediation of thermic effect of food. So, you produce less heat, you're more fatigued, and you use less calories. So, and then we talked about this issue just briefly a minute ago. High protein diets are not associated with decreased kidney function. So there are several studies about this. And to be honest with you, it's a little bit shadowy. I mean, for years and years, the narrative has been that high protein diets are harmful to the kidneys. And in people with existing kidney disease, people with chronic kidney disease, their stages 1 through 4, and then complete kidney failure, people with existing kidney disease, a high protein diet looks like it probably is associated with a accelerated diminishment in their kidney function. But that doesn't mean whatever's causing their diminishment in kidney function may be caused by the metabolic factors that are associated with our Western living. And when you eat a high protein diet in conjunction with those ongoing metabolic factors, that might be the issue in my mind. It's also possible that, for example, we know that high protein diets decrease diastolic pressure. That diastolic blood pressure diminishment might actually be somewhat helpful to the kidneys. But this study showed that higher protein intake is not associated with impaired renal function in postmenopausal women without a diagnosis of chronic kidney disease. So these were older females who were given a high protein diet, and then they checked their metabolic markers of kidney function to see if there was diminishment in their what's called glomerular filtration rate. That's a hard word to say. And their excretion of blood urea nitrogen and creatinine. And they did not have a diminishment in their kidney function, despite having that. What they did is they had an increased glomerular filtration rate, which is not a measurement of decreased kidney function. So here's another one showing no negative effects of high protein diet in trained athletes eating up to 1.5 grams of protein per pound. So let's say you got a 200-pound athlete, they'll be eating 300 grams of protein a day. So, and they had no change in metabolic markers, no increase in creatinine, no increase in BUN. And their filtration rate was slightly increased, but that does not show that doesn't mean that the kidney function is decreased. And there's multiple studies showing high protein diets do not decrease kidney function. Here's an article that I just read actually not too long ago. It says, although it is well accepted a high protein diet may be detrimental to the individuals with existing kidney dysfunction, there is little evidence that high protein intake is dangerous for healthy individuals. So if you're looking at somebody who's been diabetic for quite a while, their kidney function is quite dramatically decreased, and they're eating a high protein diet, and those people, it is possibly true that they have an increased acceleration of their kidney dysfunction. So, but in people who are active, healthy, eating healthy lifestyles, regaining their health, I think a high protein diet may actually be beneficial. If you have bad kidney function, you'd like to talk to your doctor before you do this high protein diet, I think. So I'll just review. We talked about macronutrient ratios, the insulin effect, thermic effect of protein and other foods, the leptin effect of high protein, increasing leptin sensitivity. Protein has an improved satiety over other macronutrients. I didn't go over that so much, but it is more satiating. We talked about meal timing and how insulin sensitivity is improved, muscle is preserved, leptin sensitivity is improved. All these things seem to be improved, okay? So the next facet of your program, let me know if I'm going too long. I can accelerate, okay? Physical activity, in your program, Tyson, I think the physical activity is really an important aspect. If you want to look at people who are successful in the long run to maintain their weight loss, so this is physical activity seem to be the most important thing. Now, it's not saying that physical activity is the only thing that helps people maintain long-term weight loss. That's not what this is saying. They looked at multiple factors like caloric intake, meal timing, fasting type of diet they were on, what kind of sugar and whatever nutrients. They looked at multiple factors, and they found that people who were able to lose their weight and keep it off were the people who used their dietary regimen and they maintained a consistent physical activity, an exercise program. These people were exercisers. So if we become you become a fit person by being active and you sustain activity, this is what's going to help you with your long-term weight loss maintenance. As long as if you're just doing the program, but you're not doing the consistent exercise, you may not be as successful. This seems to be the most important correlate of long-term weight loss maintenance, at least in this study. So another thing showing that people who exercise at the same time every day, and most importantly, the people who are the most successful are the ones who did it in the morning. They were able to get it done in the morning. Those people were much more likely to have what's called automaticity. They continued to do it routinely. They had this stable routine, which made it more likely that they would have long-term success. So you can do whatever exercise I think is great. You need to maintain your mobility, your fitness, your strength. All these things are important for us as we get old. But you have to be consistent. So I didn't go a whole lot about exercise. I'm going to leave that up to the coaches. But the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is this notion of what I like to call supportive accountability. And that's what's the Tyson's program is using to help us be successful. And I think supportive accountability may be the most effective model for enhancing long-term success, as this article seems to say. It says that we argue that supportive accountability, adherence through accountability coach who is seen as trustworthy is very important. So anyway, that's what we're doing here is you have an accountability coach, you have mastermind groups. And the thing about accountability is that you have to be engaged in the process for the process to work. If you are just not engaged, then you're not going to feel accountable. So I think for this program to work, I think the most effective thing, you have to be engaged in the social aspect of it, or else you lose that accountability effectiveness. And so this just goes on to one more thing, article here from a behavioral journal. It talks about how shame has shown to be a clear interpersonal function in the sense that it acts as a commitment device. Now you say shame, that sounds awful. But what I mean by shame is that when you get engaged with a group and they know you and they expect a certain amount out of you, and then you don't live up to expectations, that's a personal accountability tool that you can use to improve your likelihood of success. So I don't like to say shame is a great motivator, but I'm not saying guilt. Guilt is when you feel like you've done something wrong. Shame is when you feel like you don't measure up, I think. And if we can use this fear of shame to keep ourselves accountable, then we're more likely to be successful. But in order to do that, we have to be engaged in the groups. You have to be engaged in the talking, the Marco Polos, getting together and, showing what you're doing and just being engaged with your coach in order for this to be successful. I think that's the key for me. For me, the accountability is the key. I can follow the other programs to a degree, but unless I'm accountable, I slip, I fall back. So I think accountability factor is a big deal. And supportive accountability is the catalyst from turn us from lead into gold sort of thing. So, and with that, that's kind of going to wrap things up. I've probably gone over time, but just a few studies to support what you've been doing, Tyson.
Todd, what a fantastic presentation. Oh, forgive me. Don't let me cut you off if you had more here.
No, that's it. That's the last one there. So.
Okay. As we close, change requires courage for the educated, people who are new to this, and everyone in between. If you don't mind me asking, like Todd, you have been uber successful. I don't know if you want to tell people your results, but I'm curious what has allowed you to dive in to attack this with ferocity. You give back as much as anyone within the community. Like, what makes you special? Like, and I'm asking because I think you're an inspiration to a lot of people, whether you realize it or not, and even our listeners might benefit from a positive word from you.
Well, I would just say that on, from the appearance, I have the appearance of being engaged, and I am engaged, but it is not an easy journey for me by any means. I know the desperate feeling of being unhealthy. I know what it's like to feel poorly, to not have the energy to do things, to be continually down on myself. And I don't want that anymore. And so I think I found a mechanism where I can get rid of those things. And, I can suffer but the pain of discipline rather than the pain of regret, as I've said before. But what has helped me is I've been consistent in increasing my protein, obviously, and I've been doing the intermittent fasting. I think I've had maybe 2 or 3 days where I had like a 9 or 10 hour eating window. The rest of the time I've been less than 8 hours of eating window. That's been very successful for me. I've really tried to get clean sources of protein. That's been successful for me. And then the big thing for me, honestly, is just being engaged in the group. I don't, sometimes people think I'm over engaged, maybe, I don't know, but I know that if I'm engaged, that's going to give me impetus to not back out. If I don't engage, then it's going to be easy for me to fall by the wayside. Well, that was another failed attempt. I don't want to fail this time. I failed multiple times. I've had weight loss before. And I was pretty successful at losing quite a bit of weight, and then it came right back on to a larger degree, as we constantly see. This time, I don't want to do that. I want to maintain. I have a lot of issues, physical issues, health issues that I deal with on a daily basis that I don't want to get worse. I don't want to go down the road of continuing decline. And so this has kind of been a lifeline to me. It's been great being involved. I know the more I'm engaged, the more success I'll have. I want to be able to contribute to myself, my own health, but my family and those around me. And I really appreciate what you've done here, Tyson. I think it's great.
Well, Dr. Plum, thanks for putting this very professional presentation together with the science and the studies. And we just appreciate that you're with us and all that you're offering in the community and the Dad Tribe. So thank you again. And that puts another episode here in the books.
Thank you, Tyson. It's great to be with you.
All right. Thanks, you guys. For those who are listening, this wraps up another Six Pack Dad Tribe podcast episode. If you're listening and you'd like to explore what we have to offer, probably the best thing to do is check out the website, thesixpackdadtribe.com, and feel free to watch our masterclass and then book a call with me or my team. And we'd love to have this bless your life just as it's blessing others. So thank you again, Todd. And till we speak again.
Thank you.